Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of the Tamam Shud Case, the Somerton man's impossible mystery. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. On December 1, 1948, the body of an unidentified man was found on Somerton Beach near Adelaide, South Australia. He was well-dressed, in excellent physical condition, and had no identification. Every label had been removed from his clothing. The cause of death could not be determined. In a secret pocket sewn into his trouser waistband, investigators found a small piece of paper with two words printed in Persian, Tamam Shud, meaning finished or ended. The paper had been torn from a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. When the matching book was found, its back cover contained an indented code that has never been deciphered, and a phone number that led to a woman who claimed she had never met the man. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the world of history's most enduring unsolved crimes, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Every unsolved crime is a failure, not just of the investigation, but of memory itself. The witness, who might have placed the suspect at the scene, has died. The physical evidence has degraded or been lost in a storage room. The lead detective retired 30 years ago. The files exist, but the institutional knowledge that made them legible is gone. Cold cases are, in a very literal sense, history events that have receded from the living present into the documentary past, accessible now only through records, artifacts, and the unreliable memories of survivors. And yet cold cases do get solved. The history of forensic science is partly a history of cold case resolution. Cases that sat dormant for decades until a new technology, DNA profiling, digital facial recognition, isotope ratio analysis, genealogical databases, provided the key that previous generations lacked. The Golden State Killer was identified 50 years after his first known crime by genealogical DNA matching. Multiple historic murders have been solved through mitochondrial DNA extracted from hair samples thought to be too old and degraded to yield any useful information. The past is not as sealed as it seems. What cold cases teach us about crime is often as important as solving them. They expose the limitations of investigative practice at their time, the tunnel vision that focused on the wrong suspect, the forensic contamination that destroyed evidence, the jurisdictional rivalry that prevented agencies from sharing information. Examining cold cases is an act of institutional self-examination, an attempt to learn, across decades, from the failures that allowed the perpetrator to walk free. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Tamam Shud case, the Somerton man's impossible mystery, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives, that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Somerton man was found at approximately 6:30 a.m. on December 1, 1948. Post-mortem examination found congestion of organs consistent with poisoning, but found no trace of poison using the toxicological methods of the time. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the code found on the book's back cover under ultraviolet light, WRGOABEB/MLIOI/WT-BIMPANET/MLIABOYAK/ITNSEMSTGAB. This code has never been solved despite analysis by intelligence agencies and cryptographers for over 70 years. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine the phone number traced to Nurse Jo Thompson, later Jo Hayes, in Adelaide. She claimed she had never met the man, but reportedly turned pale when shown a plaster cast of his face. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the Somerton man's physical characteristics, a specific rare muscle formation in his feet suggesting he was a dancer or gymnast, and distinctive dental work did not match any missing persons report internationally. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of, in 2022, Professor Derek Abbott of the University of Adelaide announced that genealogical DNA analysis had identified a match in the descendant tree of Carl Webb, an instrument maker from Melbourne. South Australian police are investigating but have not made a formal identification. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The body was exhumed in 2021 to obtain DNA samples for the genealogical analysis, the most significant development in the Tamam Shud case since the original investigation. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological errors. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Tamam Shud case, the Somerton man's impossible mystery. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the Somerton man was Carl Webb or another individual whose disappearance was either not reported or not connected to the Australian investigation. His death resulted from poisoning related to a personal dispute. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence. But it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Somerton man was a foreign intelligence agent who was poisoned in a clandestine operation. The coded message and deliberate removal of all identifying labels is consistent with spy tradecraft. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Tamam Shud Code is a personal code between the Somerton man and Joe Thompson, encoding a personal message rather than operational intelligence. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Tamam Shud case, the Somerton man's impossible mystery, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the 2022 genealogical DNA identification of Carl Webb, if confirmed, would resolve the central identity mystery. The investigation is ongoing. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the indented code on the book's back cover, preserved in ultraviolet light photographs, has resisted 74 years of decipherment. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the plaster cast of the Somerton man's face, used in facial reconstruction and comparative analysis, generated the Carl Webb identification. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Tamam Shud case, the Somerton man's impossible mystery. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Tamam Shud Case is Australia's most famous unsolved mystery. The 2022 genealogical analysis represents the closest the case has come to resolution in 75 years. Whether Carl Webb is confirmed, the indented code may contain an answer that changes everything about what happened on Somerton Beach in 1948. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Tamam Shud case, the Somerton man's impossible mystery, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Tamam Shud ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.